You ready? All right.
All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday, March the 5th, Camden Planning Board meeting. Just for the record, all the members here just went on a site walk to look at the CRMS Middle School. We're now moving into our regular planning board meeting. First of all, are there any public comments on non-agenda items? Seeing none, let's move on to the next agenda item, which is proposed zoning ordinance amendments. And I think we're having a public hearing on demolition review. Do you want to introduce that, Jeremy?
Sure, I can introduce that. Maybe we ought to go and open the hearing first. Can we do that? And then I'll go down that road. Yep.
Somebody wants to make a motion to open the hearing?
I move to open the hearing, the public hearing on demolition review.
Second.
All those in favour? Aye. 5-0 in favour.
Jeff, I'm sorry, while Jeannie's looking for something, you made the motion and Ethan second. Okay. All right.
More donuts.
Thank you. Yeah, so what this hearing is for a proposed zoning ordinance amendment to Article 5, Section 2(1), and this would create an A in that section. And this would also amend Article 13, Section 311. That one article, because that's pretty simple, I'll just go into just quickly explain what that is. That section gives the Historic Resources Committee, allows them to act in an advisory role in reviewing demolition permit applications per this other section that I can go into a little more detail that we've talked about. As you know, the Historic Resources Committee in town has been actively working on things to try to protect the town's historic resources. The comp plan that was approved in 2017 has recommendations in there that the Historic Resource Committee and that the town should be proactive in drafting and coming with ordinances to protect the town's historic resources. There's a couple of ways to do that. One way is to look at demolition review. Another one is to look at a full-blown historic preservation ordinance. That is not the intent right now, to do a full-blown historic preservation ordinance. This is to create a delay process for demolition of certain properties, and that is whole or in part for properties that are located in the town's 3 national historic districts, as well as any historic national landmark in town. And it would also apply to historic districts that are pending final approval by the National Park Service. And as you recall, we had kind of gone down this road. We were potentially looking at historic districts that were under review. I think the best way to do this and most appropriate, and I think you guys agreed that the last workshop on this was to have it apply to those that are pending final approval by the Park Service. So what this does is it provides a process where abutters and interested parties and Historic Resources Committee would be notified by the applicant who wishes to demolish a building if it is in one of those, the historic overlay map or national landmark, or a district that is pending final approval by the Park Service. It does not prohibit the demolition of a building, but it does provide a waiting period where that applicant would meet with the Historic Resources Committee and look at possible other options, including reuse, reconstruction, or replacement of it. And I mean, it is intended for the applicant to work in good faith to come up with alternative scenarios, again, like rehab, possible sale, or whatever. It does not, again, prohibit someone from demolishing the building, but provides a waiting period. That 120-day waiting period can be waived by the code officer if the building or a portion of that building is not significant, or architecturally significant or contributing to the historic character of the property. And the Historic Resources Committee, per this ordinance amendment, would advise the code officer on that. And then the code officer is the one who makes the ultimate decision. If the building is significant and is going to be ultimately demolished, there's a provision in the ordinance that says that the applicant would then do a recordation of that building in line with the intent of the National Park Service's treatment for, or I think they call it the historic recordation, is what they call it. So that is what this ordinance does. It is a great first step in protecting a town's historic resources. A lot of communities go down this road before they get to a historic preservation ordinance. And I think the Historic Resource Committee was looking at this as a good first step. The Select Board, just so people know, had a workshop on a number of months ago on priorities that they wanted me to work on in terms of amendments, and this was one of them. They did not say historic preservation ordinance, they said a demolition review ordinance, and that was the Historic Resource Committee hope at the time. So that's where we are. We did, you guys have looked at this multiple times for many months, and no one has spoken against this ordinance amendment. We have heard from many people who have spoken for it. So I would, that's how I think you can take it from here, probably take comment from the public, and then you guys could close the hearing and then have some deliberation and then make a motion to send it to the Select Board for inclusion on June's ballot.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Thank you.
We have a copy of the current amendment now?
You should. You don't?
I don't
Have one right here.
On me.
I've seen it. But not the.
Is it the same as we had last time?
Same as we
Yes.
had
That was
last.
last time, that's right. You did a new one.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just doing the second public hearing.
And they have been available in our town, in the office, and they are available on the town's website as well and have been there for people's information. Mark, I think you missed the last meeting. Just to clarify, you had some concerns about, is the 120-day, I think one of your concerns was about the 120-day notice. It seemed like there was no provision for that to be waived at the time. I did come up with a provision in here to allow that to be waived. Again, the Historic Resources Committee would advise the code officer. The code officer then would make that determination based on what they had to say. If it's not contributing to the historic character of the building, or I don't know how else I phrase it, but architecturally significant, the Historic Resource Committees can say, yeah, no big deal, demo it. They can also, at the same time under this, say to the code officer and that applicant that, thanks for bringing this to us. We're not concerned about this specific building or this specific addition, and they could waive all delay periods if they wanted, or advise the code officer to do that.
Right, they don't have the authority, they just would
Correct.
be advisory.
Correct.
Non-contributing building or something of that nature.
Yep.
Or a serious hazard.
Life safety hazards and things that are dangerous buildings, the code officer this does not apply to those. The code officer and the fire chief can make a determination that they must demolish the building.
Okay.
And there's a separate process under state law to do dangerous buildings, and this would not apply to those. Okay.
Okay. Is the board ready to hear comments from the public?
Yeah.
Yeah? Thank you, Jeremy. Okay. So if there's any members of the public who'd like to make any comments, we ask that you come up to the front at the table and just tell us your name, and any comments, we'd love to hear them. No comments. Yes. You want to come forward, Dennis?
Dennis McGurk in Camden. I just wanted to say that I think this is an excellent minimalist way to begin to protect the aesthetic character of the town, and without imposing undue restrictions on homeowners and building owners and so forth. So I think it's an excellent way to do this, and I'm in support of it.
Thank you. Anybody else?
B.D. Parker, and having been on the original subcommittee of the Historic Resources Committee that worked on trying to propose this, I think it's 2004, I really am glad that some kind of step might be taken if you approve of this. I don't read these things very well, but I just wanted to ask if you know, and maybe you know, is just apart from this, is there a butter notification already included?
There's a butter notification in this ordinance
But
provision.
that's for the meeting. Is there a butter notification just in general?
Under demo, I believe there is,
Okay.
right?
Under this provision, there would be, so that...
Not now, presently?
No, not currently.
For demo?
No.
That's something.
For a permit issuance, a regular building
I don't
permit.
want to rock the boat at this point, but that's something that's very important to
Yeah,
me.
it's in this ordinance.
Yes.
Well, that's for the meeting.
Correct.
That's so that people, the purpose of the meeting is so that this can be discussed.
So you only find out that your neighbor's going to tear the house down next to you if there's a meeting.
Well, there is a meeting.
When there will be, when the meeting, and then
it's
there's a-
mandatory,
Right.
and there's a moratorium on any demolition
I guess
until that
my
meeting
question
happens.
is, if it's just a normal, if it doesn't qualify for historic, is there a butter notification?
There is not.
Okay.
This only applies to historic properties in the historic district, those that are landmarks, and
I don't want to ask you to do more things, but that's something that should exist.
No,
A butter should know regardless of whether there's a meeting.
yeah, I believe that's a very valid concern,
Yeah.
that it's not a surprise, and it's just opening it up more to the community.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hear that we obviously can't tweak this
Not-
ordinance
it's
amendment
not
for that
text-
provision,
this one,
but,
yeah, it's good.
and I mean,
good
there's,
point.
I think that deserves a much broader, deeper conversation. I mean, we don't do notice to someone that's building a house or an addition on someone's property
Yeah, they have
either.
to come before site plan review to
Correct.
butter notification.
Right. So, but I understand what Beatty's point is, and we'll take it under advisement.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any more public comments? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Ann Weigand. I'm a relatively new Camden resident, and I just wanted to speak in favor of this amendment. I am the person who is actually charged with researching and writing the Jacobs Avenue Historic District application, which my research now shows that probably the oldest bungalow on that street was lost to a demolition that happened very, very quickly. I also have experience with a small southern town where my 98-year-old mother lives, which lost a beautiful historic train depot and an 1890 warehouse that were demolished because the town was required to give a demolition permit, and attempts even to negotiate were, there was not enough time. So the 120 days is really wonderful for historical societies and for concerned citizens to be able to at least look into things. And even the giving the report to record what is there, if that had been done for the bungalow on Jacobs Avenue, we would have so much more of the fabric of that street. I'm so excited about this amendment that I actually was reading it out to my mother my 98-year-old mother on the phone as I was walking down here. And she said, well, you know, when they pass it, please bring it down to Abbeville, South Carolina, because we need it too. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any more public comments on the demolition delay?
Just for everyone's knowledge, there will be a public hearing after this. The select board will schedule that. It'll probably likely be the first meeting in April that there'll be another public hearing on this before the select board, before they vote to put it on the ballot in June.
Okay. So at this point, we can close the public. Do we
Sure.
need to make a motion to close the public?
The public hearing and then
Deliberate.
deliberate,
Okay.
and then someone make a motion. Yep.
Can I make a motion to close the public portion of this meeting?
Yeah.
Second. All right, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Does the board have any comments? Things they want to discuss?
I feel confident about what we've produced, and I believe it's definitely worthy of passing on to the select board and the community to decide.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is a really good first step. I mean, we've talked about this for years, and I'm happy to suggest this to go before the select board and the select board to approve it.
Mark, do you have any comments?
I do. I'm confused here. Take all that. I think there's a need, but I don't think it's being addressed appropriately. And I don't feel comfortable with it the way it is.
What are your concerns?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, we're not, what this does is it just kind of, it's got a negative connotation, and it doesn't have any teeth, and all you want to do is make it difficult for somebody to do something that they want to do. And that's all it does. Somebody wants to tear a house down, they have to wait 120 days. And the only reason to do that is to make it inconvenient for them to do it.
Well, respectfully, I disagree with that. I mean, the only thing it does is, I wouldn't say the only thing it does, right? Because what it does do is open up that window for an opportunity for discussion, for possibly negotiation. There are still, there's other things that happen besides just preventing them from tearing down their house. There's a plan in place for, possible, they have the meeting with the committee. They have an opportunity possibly for some salvage. They have an opportunity to negotiate or discuss, hey, this is the way our neighborhood is, we'd like to keep it this way. It's persuasion. Maybe it has no teeth per se, but it is an opportunity. And I think that a lot of people on this board, I don't want to speak for everybody, would probably support something with teeth, more teeth. But this is the approach here, I think, is looking towards as you've heard over and over again, sort of a first step down the road of getting something before the voters that we think will pass, that we think will provide that one step of protection that, as you said, has no teeth. We've talked about it ad nauseum in our working groups. We know it has no teeth, but it does have at least some procedure for allowing some discussion and giving people an opportunity to be heard and some persuasion to happen. So I think that it has value in that sense. Teeth or no teeth.
I hear what you're saying, Mark. This is only pointed at what? Chestnut Street, Jacob's Abs is now kind of on the shelf. What's the other street right in
Chestnut.
High Street?
Main Street.
Yeah, you have.
Maybe Lower Pearl is Lower Pearl.
Yeah.
No.
So it's only applicable to literally key neighborhoods that have really nice houses in them. That to me, I would like to see some kind of delay. Somebody moves here and they don't like the house and they can't get the ceiling heights right and they figure out they just want to take it down. Well, it'd be nice to have a little bit of delay so that we can kind of, as a community, come together and figure out if there's an alternative.
And I agree with that. I just I don't know if this is the right document to do it, that's all. I'm just having a hard time with that. And it puts the Historic Resource Committee in charge of it. They're the ones who review it.
They're in an advisory capacity where the code enforcement officer makes the determination. They send a recommendation to the code enforcement officer, to Jeremy. So they have say, but they are not the ones making the decision.
And just to clarify, I know Mark brought, then I'm jumping into your deliberation, but Mark brought this issue up a couple of meetings ago, 3 meetings ago maybe. And that's when then I reached out to the town attorney, drafted some tweaks to it to make them act in an advisory role. And Bill Kelly reviewed it, and he was content that that's all their role was, and this was advisory to the code officer under this language. I wanted to, because recognizing that you did bring that up the last time, the way it was written, it was, one could interpret it that the committee was the one that was making decisions and they had all of the power, but it's the code officer and the committee acts as an advisory role. That's it.
Yep. Well, and the other thing is I've been out of town for a while, so I'm not fully up to speed on the new wording here, and I just I don't feel strong enough where I'd vote to support it. I'll probably just abstain.
Well, Mark, I'm not sure I read the same amount of negativity in it that you implied, and I would hate to promote anything that is totally negative. I thought the strong part of I sort of turned your conversation around a little bit. Like, instead of having the owner take the onus that, I can't tear my house down. I like the idea that the neighbors had an opportunity to say a valued part of their neighborhood might be torn down, and I'm sure the owner obviously has rights, but I think the neighborhood does too. And I thought that the way it was introduced was to present this to the neighbors as opposed to being something negative. And I hope that other people read it my way also, because it would be, it'd be a shame to have it automatically start up a defensive sort of thing.
And that's the way I take it. And, when we first started talking about this, my thought was it's you just have a planning board review process for a demolition. That way, the public is aware of it, the neighbors get notified, they can discuss it, and that's that. Then you have your meeting. If anything can be worked out, if any of the neighbors have suggestions, they present it at the meeting. If everything's fine, tear it down.
Are you suggesting that a planning board review process might be preferable to a meeting where the Historic Resource Committee are the advisory body? Is that the shift that you're suggesting?
Well, I mean, I suppose it is.
It's tricky.
It is tricky, and I just, I'm sorry, but I've been away and I haven't spent enough time to wrap my head around exactly the way it's.
This is why we have a public process, and it's important to get this stuff right. So I'd rather take a little bit. I'd rather get it right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, I think Mark's absolutely right. Like, if it came in front of a planning board instead of a resource committee, it's more like the planning board is a third party, because we're not taking in the same issues a historic resource committee would, and it's like
this is more of a backdoor approach.
Yeah,
when it's
through a planning board would be.
That's why I feel uncomfortable about it.
Well,
it's just.
What I do envision at some point, I think it depends on what happens with this ordinance. if you guys move it forward to the select board and the select board move it to the voters and the voters approve it overwhelmingly, honestly, I think I'll likely be moving forward looking at a design review ordinance in a way to address, because if that building goes down, what building replaces it? Like, how does that work and fit in with the neighborhood? And it may not. But I do think at some point there may be room for a design review board, and maybe not a full-blown historic preservation ordinance, which a lot of towns have, but some people really struggle with them because they're very rigid and they're very strict, and you have to use the Secretary of the Interior standards, which can be very complicated. Oftentimes you got to get architects involved and all that. So another way to do it would be more of a design review ordinance or a design review board that has kind of more broad. Does it fit harmoniously in with the neighborhood? Does it, match the character of the neighborhood? Those kinds of things. I think we can work on those things moving forward, and I envision that at some point, but just not now, and we just don't have time to do that. I'm just
But if you
wanted
think
to
this is going to
respond.
be hard to move through, try moving through a design review board, because it is so subjective.
I understand. I'm just trying,
And I think, again, to address your one concern, I get what you're saying about the, I guess what I gather is that sort of you'd have an independent party as the planning board as the arbiter, right, as opposed to the design or the historical society or commission. But they are the people who actually have more information about all the resources that are available, the types of the types of alternatives that are available to demolition, where we don't really, I don't maybe have that knowledge and the resources and the contacts, and I think that they do.
The Historic Resource Committee?
Yeah, I think they're pretty actively involved in that sort of idea, and that they would be doing the legwork on that. That would be something that they would take on, and it's an interest of theirs. Obviously, these people are giving their time to that specific committee. And so they would have a stronger interest in that. Personally, that's what I would think. I do understand, though, that your concerns. I do think that Jeremy tried to address, you said you hadn't really had a chance to review too much, but I think he's tried to address some of your concerns that came up in the prior meetings, discussion groups that we've had. And as a group, we've kind of pushed those forward as well, to allow the commission to waive the 120-day period if they felt like it wasn't an issue. If it's like, okay, this is fine, they can tear this one down, or they can tear down this wing, and they can just waive it, or recommend to the CEO to waive it. So that's another thing that we gave in deference to your concerns about somebody being taxed automatically with a 120-day delay. It could even be that the person just walks into the meeting and says, you can go say what you want, I'm going to tear it down. End of story. And the committee could say, okay, well, we've got a person here who's a hard case who doesn't want to deal with us, then we can waive the period and they can tear it down. Because they don't have the right to say no. So they can waive the 120-day period for that too. And it's not clear to me if you're arguing for a design review board procedure, something more stringent with teeth, or if you think this is too strict just to delay. And that's not clear to me either, which side of that you're on.
Well, you probably shouldn't be clear on that, because I'm not.
Okay.
No, I guess I guess I'm just not at the point where I'm prepared to vote for it. It's just.
Okay.
That's it.
Point.
We don't, what are the real goals here that we're trying to do? And I'd like to see that maybe, and if the Historic Resource Committee is now in charge of this, what are their goals, and what is it that we're really trying to protect? And not just, well, we've got one neighborhood that's upset because a house was torn down. what are we doing for the town? And that's my concern.
There's some great questions, and we've got actually to open this up for another round of public comments, I believe, right?
You can.
As per procedure.
You can if you'd like.
I mean,
I'd like to just clarify for everyone, and I think this is, we've said this multiple times. Right now, there is no protection for any historic property in town. If they're a national historic landmark, if they're in a historic district, there is no protection at all. So I think people tend to think that since they're on a national landmark property or they're in a district, that building is protected in some way. Unless there's a federal undertaking, there is no protection for it at all. So those buildings all of them could go away tomorrow if someone came in and bought up the whole street, right? They could go away tomorrow and we would have no say in what happens. I just want to clarify that because I think it's important because people tend to think that historic designation from the feds means something. It really doesn't.
Unless you're getting money from them.
Unless you're getting money from them. And generally, single-family home properties don't get any money from the federal government. This is a first step. You know, the committee has talked about taking a bite at the apple and taking a first step to try to protect the town's resources. And they spent a lot of time with me on this. They've investigated and looked at dozens and dozens of communities' ordinances around the Northeast, Maine, Massachusetts, all over. Oftentimes, this is the route that things go, right? A demolition delay ordinance comes up because a building was demolished that the town people valued. And everyone assumes that those buildings are protected. They're not. So what ends up happening is they scream to the town office and say, how do we protect the rest of these properties? And the only way to do it, again, is either a demolition delay ordinance or a historic preservation ordinance. Oftentimes, communities start with the demolition delay, and then that moves into historic preservation ordinance. That's generally what happens. Just sharing that. Okay.
Okay. So does it make sense to open it back up? And we've not had any controversy from among the public.
I mean, I think the public that spoke, unless there's the public that wants to speak to some other aspect of this or they're not in support of it, I think that.
Am I seeing, does anybody feel like they have any?
Something to add, something new to add.
That we do have one. Do we need to? Okay, so can I make a motion to open the public portion of the public hearing again?
Yeah.
All right, all those in favour? Aye. Okay, Dennis, come on forward. Thank you.
Dennis McGurk, Camden. I just wanted to emphasize that Mark's questions are good questions, and we've asked those same questions of ourselves and tried to find a way to make it clear what the goal is. And I personally object to calling it a delay ordinance because that is not the goal. The goal is to give an opportunity to have a discussion with the person who wants to tear down a building or has an initial inclination to turn down a building. Give us an opportunity to talk about it and say, you know, are there alternatives that we could discuss? Are there alternatives that meet his goals, her goals, and again, preserves the character of the neighborhood? The purpose being, let's do something to try and keep from being surprised by losing something that we all consider an essential or valuable part of the aesthetic character of a neighborhood. It would be nice if we had it apply to the whole town, but we're not there yet. At this point, we're just trying to preserve those things that we have already identified as having some unique value. And so it's a restricted set. The purpose is to have a discussion, see if there are alternatives to tearing down the building, and if there aren't, then the owner can go ahead and proceed. So I think the goals are quite clear. It would be nice if there were teeth to it from the standpoint of, from my standpoint, it would be nice to have teeth in it, but I don't think we can get there from a standing start. I think this is a start. We'll see once it's in place, does it need more teeth or does it work? And so I don't know how we can do any less than this and still have something useful.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Hi, Jennifer Healy, Camden. I'm sorry. Jennifer Healy, Camden. Just a couple things. I guess to me, in thinking about this, that we try not to, as people, to make important decisions in isolation, that it's always better to have a variety of input from other people to then say, oh, you know what? I didn't think of that. And the ordinance, if nothing else, provides food for thought so that you would have these other people come to you, whether it's your neighbors or someone saying, do you realize what a gem you live in? Did you realize when you bought the house, maybe it was or wasn't a historic district when you bought it, but it is now. And we don't live in isolation. We live in communities. And you just have to have those other thoughts from other people when you make decisions in a community. And it's not just about me and my yard and my rights. There's got to be this greater sense of a community and what you're doing with that property. And really, and maybe you think, I never realized my neighbors really thought this was incredible, or the town thought this was just a great piece of architecture, not just that, but of the history that went behind it. Sometimes when people are doing some of the digging for the plaques in town, the things they come across, they're so excited about it and thrilled about that. Think, I didn't know that. So I do think the clearer the goals are, the better. I do think if we can provide examples to you from other people and other towns, Maine or otherwise, of here's what happened, where, yes, I was going to demolish this or I was going to rearrange this, and I received this information, and you know what? I changed my mind. I can't believe I did, but I changed my mind. So I do think there needs to be more education. I do think there needs to be more information in the newspaper. When I hear someone say, well, we haven't heard anything against it, my first inclination is, then that means we need to get more information out, because not everyone agrees on everything. And because you don't hear from people doesn't mean that everyone knows about it and then has thought about it. That means there needs to be more information out there about this, because then it will generate more thought. And that's what you want. You want more food for thought. So we do need to protect the integrity of our neighborhoods. They're incredible. Just take a walk. I don't know if you, as you keep saying, you've been away. Now that you're back, take a walk through these historic districts.
Well, when I say I've been away, it's 2 weeks.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. When people say they've been away, it's like...
Thanks, Jennifer.
You bet.
Anyone else? One more, okay.
Ann Wygand from Camden. I just wanted to speak to one aspect of your question about, is this just making people delay for 120 days? I think one of the aspects that hasn't been addressed as strongly is that if someone, if the decision is made, this building is going to be demolished, there's still the requirement, there is some recording of what was there. And to a researcher like me and to people who are just who value the integrity of the historic nature of a place, that is such a wonderful addition to this ordinance that there will be time for that to happen. There'll be time for something to be recorded for future generations.
And maybe I'll just follow up on that one point really quick. I think we talked about costs of those kinds of things. So what I did do was I did tweak it so it doesn't say you have to use the Secretary of the Interior's historic recordation standards. It says to, in line with the intent of those standards. So I was trying to be a little not as, you understand? Okay.
Well, along those lines, why does it now become the property owner's financial responsibility to historically record this property? And if it's such a value to the community, then why doesn't the Historic Resource Committee come in and document the property?
I hear that, and I think Jeff might have even made a comment along those lines.
Yeah, where were you?
Where were you? I'm kidding, Jeff, Mark. But he did. And I think that was a good point. I will say that it happens all the time where if there's a federal undertaking on a project, a historic project, and the federal government or the state SHPO finds that that there's an adverse impact or an adverse effect on a historic property, the applicant has to go and do a historic recordation. So this is not new. It's not something out of left field to require an applicant to go do something like this. I'm just throwing that out there. We don't have the resources to fund them. That said, I don't know how many we would, how many applications like this would come before the board or before the Historic Resource Committee and the code officer. I mean, from my perspective, I think a lot of the people, especially, Chestnut Street Historic District, High Street Historic District, those are significant properties and residences and neighborhoods, and people buy those properties, and from my view, because of what they are. So I frankly I don't know how many of these we'll have to review in a year. I'm hoping we don't have to review any. And that this doesn't apply to anyone because people want to do what's right and maintain the historic character of the community. So I'm just throwing that out there.
But yet, we feel it's important to add it to our ordinance.
Yes, because I will say that what ends up happening is there's always that one building that ends up going away. It happens in just about every community that adopts a historic preservation ordinance. They say, why didn't you do anything to stop this?
Yeah.
That happens everywhere there's a historic preservation ordinance in place.
I think since I've been here, we've had 2 historic properties, or one wasn't even classified historic, one in the corner of Free and Chestnut that was torn down. And I think that's what started the first go around to requesting demo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peggy Babcock's old house. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Next to the old YMCA. Across the.
All right.
And that's really the only one
Dillingham Point.
Yeah, I didn't get quite.
That
the
was- yeah.
controversy is.
That wouldn't have been covered by this, I don't believe.
I don't believe so.
Why not?
Because it's not in an historic
Oh.
district.
Correct.
And the other one
Gee,
was
that
right next to the
area would be.
Camden Harbor Inn, a little old house was torn down.
I mean, remember when we started this, I think the Historic Resource Committee was looking much bigger. When I met with them, they were trying to look at the entire town. Any demo of a building 75 years old or older is what we were originally kind of talking about. And we have significantly narrowed this down to protect those that the feds and the state have recognized as historic properties.
Then you're talking about Millville, all the mill houses.
We are not talking about those.
No, I know, but it would have been 75 years
Yes,
old.
it would-
That was the intent.
Yeah.
A lot
I mean,
of houses.
from state and federal perspective, when you're doing permitting, they're looking at properties 50 years old or older as historic.
Just as a,
I know, and 50 years ago, the houses weren't.
what about, Jeremy?
These ranch, you want to say that?
There are historic ranch subdivisions around the country. There are mobile home parks that are historic.
So what would have happened if people wanted to tear down the Mary Taylor School?
We would issue a building permit to demolish the building.
Because it's not in the historic district.
Correct, and it's not a national
Nobody would have
landmark.
said halt for 120 days while community.
Correct. I don't want to muddy the water and go deeper than we were going, but I think maybe you want to close the hearing because we're still in this hearing and you
We
guys
are
started
technically
deliberating.
still in the
All right.
public, so yeah.
Yeah.
Do we need to make a motion to close the hearing?
Close the hearing and
Anybody want
then
to
see if you want to
second
move it
it?
forward.
Second.
More speaker.
No, sorry, we do have somebody. Sorry, do you want to come forward? That's fine, please. But you need to come up to the front and announce yourself.
Pat Scaling, Camden. I just had a couple of facts that maybe I could share with you. We did do a survey, and I think back when I talked to you months ago, we had 18 demolitions in a 10-year period, and not all of them were historic in the historic district, but we had 18 in a 10-year period, so maybe about 2 a year. And the other fact I was just going to say was that Searsport has a demolition review ordinance, and theirs covers houses 50 years and older. So, just for your information, theirs is 50 years in Searsport.
Searsport, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
They have,
So-
they have heavy
That's all.
industry.
They've got fancy houses there. Thank you.
Big industry.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public would like to say anything before we close? Okay, please.
I'm Michael Scaling in Camden, and I think really the overall goal is to protect what this community looks like for the people who live here, the people who come here to visit, all the tourists and the people that just pass through. There's always a good feeling that when I talk with people from away, oh, what a nice little village you have here. And ultimately, that's, I think, what you're doing, or what we're trying to do, is how do we protect this? You can lose one this year, one next year, and before you know it, you've got something else in place that doesn't look the same. So this is, the goal is, how do we keep the integrity of what this community looks like and feels like and what we want it to be? So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anybody else? No. Okay, can I make a motion to close the public
You're the
part
chair,
of
you
this?
can do
All
it.
right, I'm going to make a motion to close the public part of this. hearing.
Second that.
Second. All those in favour? Aye. All right, that's 5-0. Okay, board deliberations. Any further comments?
I strongly agree with what we're trying to do here. I just don't agree with how we're doing it. That's just,
And your
that's
points,
just where I'm
are
at.
heard, and they're valid. They are,
Yeah.
so. For my part, I would just note that the lack of any opposition from the public, it may not have been promoted as well as possible, but we haven't had anybody come up and speak against it. So I think that's a positive thing, speaking in favor of the ordinance and sending it forward.
Any other comments?
I'd just like to rein it in a bit and not look to the future of let's apply this to the whole town, but let's remember this applies to the critical buildings that are on Elm Street, that are on Chestnut Street, the ones that really mark our community and say this is Camden, 1800s historic New England kind of town, not the split-level ranch up by McGonagall Lake that was built 75 years ago. That's in the woods. So that to me is, keep it in the lane, and I think it's a good first step.
That house would be mid-century modern.
It sounds better when you say it like that. I might actually get in there.
I'm comfortable with the way we prepared this, that it isn't too aggressive, and yet will act as a stop. Not a stop, but a review. So I feel confident sending it on to the select board and the public.
Okay, thank you. And I think with my developer head on, I don't think it's going to do too much harm. And, with my love of old buildings head, I think it could do some good. Again, I think it's a good middle ground. So, while not perfect, I share some of your same concerns. I would love to see things reviewed by the planning board. But I think we should keep this moving and pass it along. So, okay, somebody want to make a motion? pass it along.
Oh, do you want to close the, we have to close the public discussion? I don't know if we do,
have to
but.
close the discussion?
No, I guess we do just the motion,
Make a
okay.
motion.
That's your job.
Oh, I would like to make a motion to send this,
The select board.
yeah, but the proposed ordinance for demolition review to the select board with our recommendation for inclusion on the June ballot.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. All those against? So we have, are you abstaining or are you against?
Be against.
Oh, be against.
You can be against, okay. So we've got 4 in favour, 1 against. It gets really boring when it's like unanimous.
I know, we're always unanimous. I like
Way
this.
too much. Yeah.
Good job, Mark.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for everybody for coming.
Thanks a lot, and thanks to the Historic Resources folks. Appreciate it.
Somebody had.
Thank you to Oak Point for their patience. And Keith Rose.
Any more donuts?
What's that?
Local government, I got one more. You want one?
He needs
Chocolate,
it. He's
chocolate
crashing up
icing.
here. He's voting no on everything.
There's one behind.
I sent you one too.
There's one behind.
So who are the donuts from? We've eaten them all.
My dog is a fundraiser for the Youth Leadership Institute, so.
Well, thank you, Jeremy.
It's the next applicant.
I gave you process agendas.
Yes.
I had them out earlier. I don't know.
Yeah, I got it all in my binder.
Yes, that's helpful, Jeannie. Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I gave you a set of review criteria. You get that far.
Oh, are you ordering dinner? You gonna
Yeah, I don't have a text message hookup.
Want to, let's get this thing rolling?
Yep. Let's move on to,
I like how it's a new car every time.
Architects.
I know, architects. They're fun.
it's got this really cool new car graphics now. You just drop it right in.
Not generic, Rosie.
New cars.
Oh, I like it.
Rosie, really quick,
All right, yes.
just maybe follow along with that Jeannie gave you about conflicts of interest.
Yes.
Who's going to
okay.
vote? We're all going to vote probably today, right? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep, okay.
And enter the site walk into the record.
Yep. take
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Okay, so, all right, let's move to item 3 now, site plan review, revisions to an approved plan, reschedule from the 6th of February, and this is for Camden Rockport Middle School. First, I'm going to ask members to declare any conflict of interest or bias.
Nope.
Seeing none, okay. Who is voting? We all voting? So we've got Mark, do you want me to list everybody?
No.
Okay, really good. So we've got enough so that we won't have a tie. Okay, and we have just been on a site walk. We were there at 3 p.m. on the site of the middle school, and all of us here were in attendance at that site walk. Okay, can we move on to the presentation?
Sure, and I'll just really quickly just
you're the
describe to you a little bit about this project before the applicant's designer does. As you know, this project came to the planning board. Most of all of you were on the board except Ethan when this originally came to the board way back when. I got that right? Mark, you were on the board. Jeff, everyone was. At that time, the MET building was proposed to be demolished, and a lot of things happened in town. The MET building is now staying, and this approval now would include the MET building staying on the campus, and it, for the most part, reconfigures some existing parking and some existing paved areas to, what is that, the south, or is that the east?
The south side of the
South side of the MET building. And then this approval would also encompass a handful of very minor changes that are proposed and staff has already approved. That's really it. So I guess I'll turn it over to Steve and Tyler from Oak Point.
Just to continue with that, and some of the changes associated with this application are for some of the value management that happened during the bidding process. So we don't really have a whole lot of long presentations, so it's going to be relatively quickly, but I did want to start.
Maybe quick before you go there, I would just add, I did wrote a memo to the board, and I'll just including that into the record.
Yep.
And that memo indicates that staff, myself, and code officer have reviewed the plan for completeness or the application for completeness, and also to ensure that it complies with the town's development standards such as building coverage, ground coverage, parking, all that kind of stuff. So that has been done, and we find that meets those standards, and I'll just enter this memo into the record.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Steve, that's it for me.
Sure. So I'm just going to start with the existing conditions out there prior to the middle school project starting. Knowlton Street on the bottom, the existing building, the athletic fields that were pre-development condition prior to the project, and where we were today, and primarily what we're here for at this point in time is the MET, which is located right here. There's pink just to it would be the west of this. The north is actually in this direction up towards. So when we talk about north, we're talking about this side, and south would be down by the softball field, this being the softball field, the superintendent's office, which is the bus barn, and the parking that we were discussing earlier today out on the sidewalk. This was the site plan that was previously approved. This is just a rendering of the site plan for all the purposes. We really don't have any changes out of anything outside of what was previously discussed relative to utilities or the MET remaining, and a lot of that development right around in here. At the pavement area, there was some minor changes to this parking tier, but outside of that, there are no horizontal changes to the location of the school, the playground, the parking lots, the athletic fields as a part of this application. There were some minor changes to grading, as we discussed before, and also some miscellaneous changes to utilities are primarily what the other changes to this application include. This is the overlay plan that we had provided previously as far as the pre-application meeting, where we're showing the previously approved development with the changes in red for the proposed changes to the plan. And those changes, as you can see, there's a lot of red around in here. Again, we're going to create a new entrance coming in, a controlled entrance into the south side of the MET, double loaded parking tier, 60 feet wide, two-way entrance in here, and two-way back to here. We have some, again, perpendicular parking. And then we turn to a one-way parking in a clockwise direction with 45-degree angle parking and a connection into the middle school parking lot. So as a result of that, it would be removing approximately 7 spaces within the middle school parking lot to accommodate the entrance, and would be adding 42 parking spaces around the MET. So the numbers end up to be a new total parking on site, I believe, is 173. Previously, we were 138. We're maintaining, there's a little red right here. We're maintaining, there's an existing crosswalk here. We saw it on the site walk. That was previously going to be removed. That's remaining. As expected, circulation again, traffic circulation would be, two-way coming in and out of this entrance, and then one-way towards the north into the middle school parking lot, which allows traffic that may be in the parking lot looking for space to come back out on Knowlton Street and look for space around the MET before moving along. There's other changes here to the building, which include adding a new entrance to the south side of the MET with a canopy and accessible entrance. There'll be 2 accessible parking spaces right outside of that to conform with accessible standards. There's one change that we had submitted that is not depicted on this plan particularly, that we had subsequently submitted after the application was submitted, to a change to the walkway from the middle school to the after-school program over at the Student Center, in which we offset that walkway 8 feet from the parking for additional buffer and had located boulders, site light poles, foundations, and trees is an improved buffer and protection of pedestrians in there. Stormwater, as a result of this, again, as we mentioned earlier, is going to just sheet flowing off into the previously designed drainage systems. The stormwater results of this really are if you read I don't know if you've read the drainage study or not, we do have an increased amount of impervious now. We went from a deficit of about 20,000 square feet because this wasn't here, and we're adding back an 8,000 square foot building. And in the end, it's in the vicinity of 15,000 square feet of pavement, so we got several thousand more square feet. However, between the changes, in drainage paths and things like that, we're very, very close to the pre-development condition now. But there's other factors that aren't taken into that. We're a conservative analysis, and I believe that if we took other factors in this, all the storms would be less than the pre-development condition. This is the grading plan. The previously approved plan within red, the grades that have been modified for part of this application. There's a lot of red there, but in reality, it's just this field was dropped. Raised a foot, and then those grading changes extended into the softball field, and then we have primarily grading changes around here. And there's some miscellaneous things that were done as far as the final design and some construction detailing. This is blow up of the plan that we talked about today in red, just to show the building, the parking locations, the buffers where we're going to have over 30 feet from the property line, which is right here, that southern abutter and the parking area. Curb lines, there'll be a new curb landscaped area as you're coming in, the controlled entrance now, the stop sign. The walkway is virtually in the same exact location that it previously was as far as that curb goes. There'll be tip downs for access to allow this to be an accessible access into the building. And it'll be accessible down here to the path and all the way to the middle school and beyond. The landscape plan, I think, as Jeremy previously mentioned, conforms with the town requirements for buffers. This is something that we didn't really look at that hard out in the field, but it's extensively landscaped buffer, including canopy trees, or like an ornamental trees and shrubs within our created landscaped area here by removing pavement. Also, the existing hedge is right here that's being maintained. We're also adding a series of red maple along. That's part of the landscaping and other buffer area that we're putting along the walkway, in between the walkway and the parking area. Site lighting has been added to this that was previously not there. These fixtures are of the same type, LED fixtures with full cutoff, backlight control, and the same correlated temperature that we previously had. We'll note that one thing as a part of this application is that fixture was value managed from more of a, I don't know if you would term it as an architectural fixture, to more of a conventional shoebox fixture. But the lighting properties are very, very similar as to the previously approved fixture. We talked about drainage already. This is the pre-existing drainage plan and post-development. There's really not much that's changed in that outside of the area around the MET. Those were the numbers that we just talked about as far as the pre-development and post-development flows. And this is the plan that was submitted to you after the fact that shows the clouded area for the walkway. I don't know if that's about summarize. This is the changes to the site. I don't know if you want to talk briefly about the building or anything.
Let's see if we get to the.
So primarily, the major changes are obviously going to be the demolition of the remaining portions of the existing middle school. We're going to be maintaining the original footprint of the Mary Taylor building, maintaining existing fenestration primarily. Some of the changes that we're going to be making are on this southern side. We're going to remove the fire escape that's in relatively poor condition and add a new entry, accessible entry there with a small canopy to help delineate that entrance. We are going to add some additional windows in the quarters as you go on the upper 2 floors. These are the occupied floors of the building, but primarily other than that, we're going to be maintaining the existing fenestration and architectural character of the building. Looking at it from the north, this is where the existing stair tower and elevator tower are. That will be removed. We're going to restore the masonry on that side and add those 4 windows that you see there. Other than that, the goal is to try to repoint as much of this building as we can, maintain as much of the architectural character as we can, replace as many of these kind of older windows as we can as an alternate. But primarily, the existing look and feel of this building is not going to change. That's the end of our presentation. You want to leave this up or just?
Yeah.
I think you can leave
Just
it
in
out.
case.
All right.
Okay, so we need to go through and check that all the requirements have been met. And we also need to...
Remember, I went through and I made sure that they have met all the submittal requirements and that all of the development standards have been met. I did a memo to that effect.
Yeah.
You can do a motion.
There's language.
Jeannie put some motion language there for you that I think you can use for that.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
We're going to have to, after we do this, then we're going to have to continue the do a motion to continue the public hearing that we started a month ago.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Should we do any discussion beforehand?
Well, that's after we've opened.
Sure. Generally, you do the discussion, you get into the deliberation after you close the hearing. We haven't opened that hearing yet.
Oh, okay.
And then after the hearing, we'll go through all the...
That's how I would handle it, yeah.
Okay, so first of all, we need to decide if we're willing to enter Jeremy's memo into the record.
I would like to make a motion to rely on the findings of the Director of Planning and Development in his memo dated March 3, 2020, that Article 12, Section 3, site plan content has been satisfied by the applicant's submissions as outlined in the application narrative dated 1/17/2020.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second that.
Second, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that's 5-0, unanimous.
Were you reading that?
And now we can move forward. Now we can continue the public hearing.
Well, let's talk about the possible motion on the plans and the submission submittals that they submitted. You can do a motion and just, again, Jeannie wrote you something there. You can try to do
I'd make a motion that the plan under review consists of site redevelopment plan sheets 1 through 20, all revised January 8, 2020. Architectural plan sheets 1 through 14, all revised January 17, 2020. Stormwater management plan revised January 8, 2020, with further revised submissions for plans CS 101, CG 101, and LS 101, all dated 2/05/2020.
Do we have a second?
I second that motion.
Okay, all those in favour?
Aye.
Is that? Basically, we're saying that this is what's under review and we're confirming that this is what this motion says, right?
Yes.
Okay, so all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye, so 5-0, okay.
All right.
Now can I continue the public hearing? Do we have to open it first because it was closed?
reopen.
Okay, I make a motion to reopen the public hearing.
Second that.
Okay, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Is there anybody from the public who would like to?
Planner summary.
I mean, I think, and I just regurgitate what you heard from me earlier. I mean, this is a modification of the approved plan that was done a number of years ago, keeps the MET, tweaks, has some minor tweaks as detailed in the plans, red line plans that we just reviewed. The MET building stays, parking lot is redone and reconfigured. And then the parking access or driveway access and parking to the rear of the MET, connecting it to the parking lot out in front of the new building. And then there are minor changes throughout the site as shown on these plans.
Okay. So, again, is there any members of the public who'd like to say anything? Not seeing any. I'll open it up to board discussion. Gentlemen?
When you talk about parking, the numbers you rattled off were 173 currently, and it was 138. You're talking about.
Those are after construction. So previously approved, we had a total of 138 parking spaces with the improvements with the original permitted plan. This application would increase that to 173.
So you had 35 parking spaces.
We were eliminating 7, and then we're adding 42 around the MET. Eliminating 7 in the middle school parking lot to make the connection. But, yep, per net.
At 35.
Yep.
Is that adequate for the MET building? 35 parking spaces?
Well, it is really 42.
It's for the site, and if you look at the building table, there's a parking table that they have on the one sheet, and I don't remember the numbered sheet.
Yes.
It greatly exceeds the number required under our zoning ordinance.
I have it right here. But
By upwards of 70, 60 some plus spaces.
So exactly that. It exceeds your requirements and your.
By 60 some spaces.
60 spaces?
Mm-hmm.
So why are we thinking that way?
So you're saying for the entire middle school and for the MET building, you're only required to have 113 parking spaces?
Yes.
Middle school. High school it changes. Middle school, high school it bumps up quick.
Yes.
It's based on the number of classrooms and not square footage like a lot of other uses. So it ends up being a lot less
Than you would think.
on paper that's required, maybe not in reality.
Right. So I mean, I think it's important.
You know, my concern is, I mean, there's always been a parking issue on Knowlton Street. And the reason we're paying umpteen $1 million to build a brand-new school is to resolve part of the parking issues. So that's a concern I have.
Let me add to the parking calculation is that the way that we arrive at the number of parking spaces typically, and this would be normal through a state process too, is we would identify the number of staff, the total number of staff, and then we would add anywhere from 15 to 20 spaces for visitor parking and staff.
You know what? We have a unique situation here because we've had a school.
Yep.
Right? We had a school. We know how many parking spaces were at that school. They weren't adequate.
Yep.
So
this is
what's the difference?
173 from 106. So
how many?
Is that from a school standpoint, there's and you can care to add in something on this too, but in our experience with schools is that there's two things. There's a normally daily operation of a school, and then you get after school events. Mm-hmm. So essentially right now what we understand is going on in the world of parking out there is that there's a large parking in the back. There's one out the south side of the MET that's existing now that we talked about that we're redeveloping essentially. We're adding parking spaces down there. And then there's a lot of staff and parents that are actually parking out along Knowlton Street in parallel parking. A lot of that parking is all being taken off the street. And this is something I think we talked about when we did this original application, when we came through the first time, is like that's taking those staff, because normally what's going to happen is anybody who wants to park is usually looking at being as close to that possible point, wherever they are located, and what happens in retail, it happens everywhere, you know what I mean? So they're not going to park another, like, normally, another, 100 feet away, out in the street. And so the size of that parking lot that was developed was for the normal operation of the school. There's overflow parking down at the bus barn, which is being reverted back to its original use, a bus barn. So you only have, that's a fraction of the parking down there is going to be used now. And there's going to be pedestrian connections.
From what I see, most of that parking there going over to the bus barn will be eliminated.
You're talking the parallel parking along the entrance.
Along the road over?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yes, that connection road does get eliminated, but we still maintain the parking that's around the bus barn as it
Around the
currently
bus
is.
barn, but on the connection road, off to the left, you've got parking spaces in there. I would say.
And this is up here, right here, is that there's a series of parallel parking spaces that, these are mostly used for pickup.
Yeah.
I mean, you saw it today when we were out there,
Okay,
we
but-
started.
I'm talking on this side of the pickup.
You mean right in here?
Nope.
Right over here?
That way, right there.
Yeah, these were filled. When I came in here, and typically what happens, this is where parents are picking up, is right here. So they have the buses staging out, and this is something we talked about back during the middle school original application, is the buses are basically staging out here, and there's two phases of buses in Knowlton Street. Well, the parents are backed up behind the buses, and then you have parents, the ones that get through first and arriving early, are then queuing right here within the parent. See how this is the original actually rendering. It's identified as the parent drop-off. So these people are backed up until the buses go away, and then once the buses leave, then the next sort of group of the late parents are coming in here and further picking up kids and circulating around here. And that was the benefit of the plan, is all this is getting moved off the street. So the drop-offs, the pickups, and which is essentially now opening up, not only that, but all your parking along Knowlton Street.
So I can take that as you, as the engineer, are saying that this will take all the parking off of Knowlton Street.
This is providing the opportunity to take your parking off of Knowlton Street, yes.
If people stop.
Could you go to
it's different.
It's still public parking.
But I'm talking associated with school, like there's the rationale behind it now is that, so here's the original rendering, is that now you're parking, when you're looking at the entrance to the school, right here and over here, and now the staff parking and visitor parking is in here, and this would be the drop-off, the parent drop-off coming through here. So that was sized specifically to allow for the entire staff, and then we had an extra 5 spaces out in the back in here for other staff. So, and not to mention then the bus barn over here, there's a pedestrian connection, and then you have a series of parking spaces, which we're adding a couple, which are making up for the ones that are lost right in here. There's perpendicular parking, and then essentially all the way around the bus barn. So this is going to be less intensively used
I thought you
over
just
here.
said the parking around the bus barn is being eliminated.
It's being maintained.
Being maintained.
Parallels on the.
Yeah,
It's just the connection road that.
the connection, yeah, here, let me go back.
That road that they showed where you were indicating, where you saw the
Yeah.
parallel parking, that's
This-
what's been eliminated.
This right here, this road, I don't know, I might have written down exactly how many parking spaces are right here, but this is, that's being reconfigured. That's part of what the project is that we're eliminating that to maintain this, and now we're putting parallel parking in here, but all this, see, all this parking right here is still here. We're not touching anything over here, other than we're adding a space where we're eliminating that, or two, right, where we're taking out the
My
access.
point is, when you pull into that parking lot for the MET building, you will no longer be able to turn left and exit through the bus barn.
No, you won't.
Area.
That's right.
Okay, so what it does is it creates congestion coming over into the middle school.
You have the opportunity, yes. You have two things that you can do, is that this is perpendicular parking, so you can, two-way, coming in and out of here.
Yep.
So up until there's this crosswalk right here, those are conventionally sized parking tiers, meaning they're 60 feet wide. with your 18-foot spaces, your 24-foot wide aisles. This is about as conventional from a parking standpoint as it gets. So this is two-way. You can come right back out this entrance here. Once you enter into this is one way along the back, and then you would come back in here. So when you define congestion and what's going on, I think that just from a standards and what's going to happen is this is like any other school, is that, when a school lets out, your first thing that's going to happen is you're going to have a series of parents picking up. You're going to have buses in the bus loop, which is now separated, and we're taking this off the street, and all the buses are going to be over here. Now we have opportunities to queue all the parents and pickups and drop-offs through a loop in here, and you're providing more desirable parking relative to the actual building entrances over here. Part of the issue with the existing school was that the building was very long, and you had teachers, that have classrooms in very different sides of the school, and they had a tendency to try to park near where those are. And this is controlled through these entrances. So I believe that you're going to have a tendency for people to want to use this and be promoted to try to get closer to where they are, which should in turn make this parking, which is very close to the existing school building now, less desirable. And I think from a number standpoint, we're increasing the numbers substantially.
Just to clarify, by 67 spaces.
The same uses are on site that are there now. It's the same staff, it's the same superintendent's office, the same program. And we're increasing the numbers.
I'm just, with all respect to Mark, who owns property on Knowlton Street, I don't, I'm looking at this a different way. I think you have too much parking. Part of the hue and cry of having that school on Knowlton Street, keeping it there, was that it was an asset to the village, and kids could walk there, walk downtown after school, and it wasn't going to turn into be like another Route 90 school with acres of parking around those schools out on Route 90. This, to me, is just so American. It doesn't acknowledge nature that could have, with reduction of parking spaces, could come up and kiss those schools, or it doesn't acknowledge kids going on bicycles or walking. It's turned over to automobiles. And I would have thought that we would have learned that from as long ago as the 1950s, that cars have their place, but they don't have to be the epicenter of it. So I wish that you had reduced number. But again, I understand Mark's contention, but I know how pleasant it would have been to drive by that school and look from Knowlton Street into kids playing in those playing fields. And now I'm looking through 137 cars.
I think the reality of it, it would be great if we relied on cars more and the busing system worked and parents utilized it more. But the reality is there's a lot of pickup and drop off by parents.
Yeah.
And if we don't provide both the queuing space in that parent loop and the additional parking, we're going to be back to the same problem that Mark was concerned about before, when backed out onto the street, and then we've done a disservice to your community.
You see my point, though.
Completely. Yeah. But I think the reality is that this is an appropriate amount given the daily functions and then the after-school events that will spill out of the site if we reduce this any further.
And I know we're not at the place now we can change parking. I just wanted to state that there's another way of looking at it.
You guys are hitting both sides of this issue.
Yeah.
You're hitting, you're going to have events in the evening, and it's going to put high demand on parking. That's going to happen. And there's going to be a lot of parking. People are going to be parking over by the bus barn and along the street and pretty much anywhere they can. That's what happens with events. It seems like there can never be enough parking for those.
So
but on the other
did
side,
you arbitrarily raise the number of parking places? Did the number of parking spaces come from the area that you were able to put them into, or did you come to a new number when you took over the MET school and worked up to that? What are you, 180, or what's the number?
173.
Total 173. So again, just to jump back again, is that, what's an appropriate number of parking for the middle school is something that and this goes back to pretty typical standards. This isn't extreme by any means. It's providing enough parking for the staff, everybody who's coming to that building during the day, to have a place to park, and then having, 15 or 20 parking spaces for visitors that show up during the course of the day. There's volunteers, there's other people, your parents picking up drop-offs. You need to have space for them, otherwise they're out in Knowlton Street parking on the street.
You exceeded the standards with your.
And we did, but that
Your
was.
standard, I believe, is 1 per classroom, which
It
would
was
have
like
resulted
30,
in 30,
yeah.
and there's 76 staff members there. So
Yeah.
if we had gone strictly by your standards, we would, again, be causing another traffic
You'd be
issue.
yeah.
So we're doing the best to reflect on both what the access and active events in the middle school are going to be, and then reflecting as well on moving the superintendent's office to the MET, the Zenith program to the MET, which isn't generating a lot of traffic. But again, there's going to be people coming in for adult education, other components that are going to be more transient, and having that additional visitor space on that side of the campus, I think, makes a lot of sense.
Well, it's just, when I drove around the bus barn today, there were a whole lot of cars parked around there. And if those are all the vehicles that are going to be using the MET building now,
Aren't those contractor cars?
they'll put them someplace.
There's a combination. I don't believe all of them are. There are a number. I was parked in there. Our owner's rep was the clerk. So there's a fair amount of contractor cars. We're trying to push them a little bit further down the
Well,
street.
they're not going to be here.
It looks like the
forever.
contractors are all parked behind the fence.
Some,
They go back and,
not all, but some.
Yeah.
A lot of them are there. Some are parked a little bit further up on Lions Lane, or on Knowlton, further down. They've got some parking agreements. So a lot of that will be leaving.
yeah, but those weren't the vehicles around the bus barn.
I couldn't tell you all of them. I know some of them are.
Apparently he can.
Mr. Rose has.
You were also there when 13 bus drivers were parked there, because they were out on their routes.
Right. Okay. Thank
When
you.
I go inspect that property, that's where I park. I'm just throwing out there. I think that's where Steve parks too.
I was parked there too, yes.
Okay. As long as I'm on a roll.
Madonna right before a meeting again. You're the
Next,
one
the
with
dentist's
Madonna
office
set
was
up.
this?
Parents, man.
You brought up a question about the sidewalk in front of MET.
Yes.
And you were going to redo those if budget constraints allowed you to.
That's what's being carried out, yes.
How do those budget constraints that you're talking about, which would benefit student well-being, compare to constraints or non-constraints with the executive offices?
So I think
I asked that question properly so you understand?
Yeah, and I'm.
I guess I didn't. So let's.
So I think you're asking basically why wouldn't you, what's the value of improving that sidewalk, and that's, as a part of this project versus something else, is the way I'm reading it. And from a student standpoint, from a pedestrian, let me see if I can move forward here.
I guess my point is that if we're talking about budget restrictions, we ought to be focusing on the children. That's what the school's for, the children and the children's safety, and not fancy executive offices for the school administrators and board.
And there's probably a couple things to include in this conversation, and one of them is that, and sorry, I got the wrong sheet here, but so this sidewalk is an existing sidewalk. It's used now. There's a crosswalk here. There's very little buffer. It's roadside, and we are improving all the sidewalk, with curbs up to this point. I think this is what we talked about after that, and because this wasn't here before. This is being carried as an option, so if there's money or there's value to it, there's the ability of them to choose that, when we get a price for this thing. And that's what the uncertainty part of it. It's very common to include options into large projects, so that when you bid something, you bid it effectively, and you don't want to leave, let's quote unquote, like money on the table, when you have an opportunity to do something. And this is one of those items that was chosen because the second part of this, and I encourage Tyler to jump in this, is it's when you're doing construction, this is a very independent piece of construction. The sidewalk itself, It's not dependent on a lot of other things, and while we're building and we have money allocated towards the building, those things are more efficiently done at one point in time. Which a very valuable thing is this cross connection coming back here, because this is where the number of students I think are passing, so there's a fairly substantial size amount of money that's being spent on providing a walkway, like a paved walkway, all the way from the school building, as opposed to coming out from the middle school over the F-school program, as opposed to coming out on Knowlton Street, crossing Knowlton Street because there is no sidewalk past that. Once we get past in the south, along these residential properties, there's 3 properties, whatever that is, probably, several hundred feet until you get to Lions Lane. There is no sidewalk on that side of the road. So
Why doesn't the town pay for the Knowlton Street sidewalk? It's a public sidewalk. I could walk on that sidewalk and have nothing to do with the school.
I guess it's a question for the town. I mean, it's an existing condition. It's the way it is. It's the way that we arrived here. We thought there was certain value before, and this was before our crossing point was right here. So we were eliminating this southerly crosswalk, and we put it up here. Now, this one, as a part of this application, was removed. This is just an overlay. It moved up into the front because we thought it was a better place that the staff could control this crosswalk as opposed to down by that entrance.
When do you think they're going to be working on that sidewalk, the sidewalk that you're going to be replacing and doing up there?
This walkway right here?
Yeah.
Probably July. I mean,
August.
We need to get in there. Demolition's going to start, mid-June with abatement, and then we need to get that building out of there before that earthwork goes.
Yeah.
But the first piece that the current plan is that parent parking, or parent drop-off and bus loop. Excuse me.
This area right here.
Not the
So
bus loop,
they're going to be
moving south.
demolishing in sort of a northerly direction if the plan's still the same, and we're going to start with the parking lot right in here and then move back to the bus while this will still be here intact at that point in time. So the schedule for the MET, unless I'm not sure what we're at exactly at this point in time, but is not intended to start until after the middle school work is completed, so that we don't have any conflicts with contractors.
Summer's going to be a very busy one on site. No surprise, right?
So can I just ask a question? We send these forms to different department heads to make comments, and there was a comment from our Public Works Director, Dave. I think you chatted with him probably.
Yes.
From his perspective, it's preferred that when reconstructing the sidewalk along Knowlton Street, that the utility poles be relocated outside of the sidewalk. On the building side, this will aid with road and sidewalk maintenance, making the roads and sidewalks safer for those who use them. How's that playing out?
So it's all encompassing with that sidewalk. So we've met with Dave, we've met with the Public Works guys, we've met with CMP, we've met with Consolidated to try to work out a plan. We tried to attack this back when we were doing the middle school, from relocation of poles to backside of sidewalks, because the former Public Works Director was also questioning at that point in time. It's a cost issue, frankly, is what it comes down to. Is that, when we first
relocate the poles.
Relocate the poles.
And is CMP saying those are ours to relocate or yours to relocate?
Those
They're not
would
relocating them?
Yes, I mean, there's a cost associated with relocating those. Now, Dave is, seeing what he can do, I guess, quote unquote. When we initially went down this path, there was it's substantially, I want to say amounts of money, tens of thousands of dollars to relocate the poles and all the work that goes along with it. And don't quote me on the exact number, but I mean, there was a lot of money. And we have had subsequent meetings with them and Public Works in trying to devise a plan that could happen. There was some representations that, maybe there's a possibility some of those poles could be replaced under like maintenance programs, things like that outside of the sidewalk areas. And that's something that we intend to continue to pursue to try to make that happen. And we're working with Dave, and I just, again, it comes down to cost. I mean, and there's, there are issues with, and some of these trees. I mean, it's getting a little closer, but we also have a little wider width of road in front of the MET than we have up here, so this is 28 feet wide, and then I think it's like 30, 31 as we get in here for whatever reason, as far as the poles are located. So, the idea would be is if we're going to relocate the poles, then it gives us an opportunity to relocate. I mean, if we're going to do the sidewalk, we can move the sidewalk out, bring that so it's uniform with the rest of the road, gain a couple feet, and then we don't have to move the poles quite so far into the existing, canopy trees that are there in front of the MET without chopping a significant amount of the canopy out.
I just have a couple questions. In soccer fields, you have a red rectangle on the your line work.
In the soccer field.
It's a diagonal.
Which sheet number is that?
It's the one you gave us today. Right next to the word soccer field, you see that?
Oh, that's the location of the temporary sediment basin.
The what?
Temporary sediment basin. It's out there now. So it's an existing thing right at this point in time.
It was just this. I was wondering what that was.
If you want to turn around, I can probably point at it right here. It's right here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And then my other question is on the north side, you're regrading. Let's see if I can reach out. Okay, good. I can. You're regrading this circle area here, and it looks as though we're, instead of being convex and pitching as much of it away from the building, we're now kind of cupping it and pushing it towards that north facade at 103 with the finished floor at 103.
It largely has to do, and I don't want to blame anybody, but I'm just going to point at the guy next to me, is that
subtle.
It has to do with there's a door over here now that was added, so we had to drop grade a lot faster. You can see how originally the grades came around the corner and all the way to this access point right here. But this was an egress issue, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's an egress door that comes out of there, and there's an overhead door for utility access to the basement mechanical space.
And so my question is, are you confident that the water's not going to pool in that corner and it is going to make it to that catch basin?
It is. There's a distance that is sloping away, and the fine grading along the building that it's going to flow away from. I don't know what exactly off the top of my head, but I mean it's normally, it's probably like 10 feet at like 4% or something along those lines.
So you do have that in your details that the grade carries away from the building?
Yes. It will go away from the building, yes, and it will go around.
Yeah, that was my only worry in looking at it was that.
Yeah.
I mean, just because, so I'm just going to point, this is the catch basin that we're talking about.
Yeah.
He's got a 102.
And if I looked at.
Should.
Yeah.
Go to it, right? I mean, that's
what's going to happen is there's like a low spot, like outside of here, over here somewhere, and there's a couple spot grades in there.
Okay, so
it's
you
going to
do
be
have
a low
spot
grade.
grading.
So it's going to come away from the class. This is the classroom wing, right here. So everything slopes away from the classroom wing to more or less like a really subtle swale that runs, 20 feet off. So before it hits the sidewalk, so it will that water from within there will cross over this walkway, get into that catch basin.
It will get into that.
Yeah.
And that walkway is paved?
It's going to be paved, yes.
So the water's going to run across the
walkway.
It's a multi-purpose, vehicle/pedestrian. I mean, this is where this would be an access for the overhead garage for more maintenance, I guess, with Keith, and getting into the space back in here. It's not your normal,
I guess it seems like you're saying you're actually designing it so the water's going to run across the path.
It's just, I think what Jeff's pointing out is that before it was a little different, meaning it was always going across.
Less water going across.
But it was more sheeting, not as opposed to a more concentrated location.
I mean, I guess that's the concern, is that then you're directing all this water and it's concentrating. At that point, it's going to be sheeting across the path, and is that going to cause... I mean, that's just...
I don't think it's... This is a relatively small area, and there's some that's still going to continue to do that, but the amount of water from this area, I'm not overly concerned personally in the way that we're causing any, erosion or failure issues with sidewalks.
Yeah, I'd just like to keep my eye with the north side like that and a building like that. It's never going to see sunlight, and with water going across a paved surface, and the paved surface is usually colder.
Yep.
Oh well.
But
Somebody
you
a job
guys spoke
standing
to
here,
it.
right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
It's main.
It comes down to like somewhat of a maintenance issue. You know,
Yeah,
if there's
that's-
maintenance there, you got sand and salt, and
We'll work on it.
that's not really a location of a normal pedestrian access.
That was it for me. Thank you, guys.
Anything?
I don't really have much to say. I think we've covered quite a bit.
Oh, can I say one more thing?
You can have my.
Because at the site walk, Jeannie mentioned that, remember when we were first here and we were talking about red maples in the road, and I was saying that they have aggressive root systems, and with sanitary lines, it's kind of an iffy world, but really it's the old sanitary lines, it's the old clay lines that we have. So when we put in the red maples and we have a new sanitary poly line, and it's plastic, to me, that's not a concern.
Less of an issue?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not. I mean, those root systems
Yeah.
don't really get in those pipes
Yeah, I
unless you
haven't
really
seen it.
air, installer error. It's the clay pipes that we have in Knowlton Street and the old CMP drainage lines that are just totally compromised. That's what I just wanted to say.
The Orangeburg here in Camden?
What's that?
They try not to.
We had a lot of that in Bangor. Orangeburg, I mean, it's like a paper clay kind of
Yeah,
pipe.
transite. We have
Oh.
transite. I haven't seen that.
It's everywhere in Bangor. It's
Did a lot for like electrical conduits. Yeah.
On one of your preliminary meetings here on this MET change, did members of the community speak about having a slightly more traditional canopy design?
Yes, yeah, some of that was brought up, and we reviewed that and didn't feel that it was going to make a significant change by altering that. And this is something that through our work with the district that
Okay.
this is their preferred
Yeah.
design.
All right.
Okay.
all right. So, I mean, just for trying to make sure we're moving forward. I don't know if you guys have any questions left, but we are at 5:45 almost. Budget meeting starts in here at 6:30. We do have to be out of here probably by 6:15, no later. Correct, Dan?
Approval criteria.
Do we have to, I mean, do we consider the public hearings closed at this point? Because we've just been discussing between ourselves, right? So,
Really, I think you're on to review approval criteria.
Yes.
okay.
It's a good time to go over.
Unless you guys want to keep deliberating.
Move through this fast.
Yes.
But then everyone have to wait.
Fast.
And remember, we need to go through each one of these, so someone could do a motion and just get it rolling. And I think we go to 13, or no, we go down to 10. Actually, we go to 9 only, the others are not applicable.
Yep.
Okay, so number one is preserving and enhancing the landscape. Is there any landscaping, either existing or proposed, involved with this proposal?
There is.
Yes.
Okay. Is it changing?
It is.
Okay. Do we feel like the landscape has been preserved in its natural state as far as practical by minimising tree removal, disturbance of soil, and by retaining existing vegetation during construction? And after the construction is completed, has this been designed so that the landscaping will define, soften or screen the appearance of off-streets parking areas from the public right-of-way and abutting properties and or structures to minimise the encroachment of the proposed use on neighbouring land uses? Do we
Yes.
feel that has been done?
Yes.
One thing they've done is eliminated a 30-foot paved section in the parking lot and increased with permeable.
Things the landscape
So they've
buffer.
improved it.
The buffer.
Yes. Is that just seeded, or is that?
No, that's heavily landscaped.
Heavily planted.
A lot of stuff in there.
Nice. Yeah. And I appreciate what you've done with the boulders and the trees, the canopy trees. That'll make a nice little shaded area for people to. And also, as I said the first time you were here, you've done some great work in maintaining the existing trees as best as practical and going out and IDing the hazard trees. And I believe there was one that was just nothing you could save. And so I really appreciate everything you guys have done with the landscaping and trying to preserve the character. I'm looking forward to this site.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think
The deference shown to the butter is really, admirable. I appreciate it.
Okay. So somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move that the planning board find that the landscape has been preserved insofar as practical and improved even in some areas, especially in particular with regards to the abutting properties.
Okay, so.
That's my motion.
Okay, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Number 2, erosion control.
This is yours, Jeff.
This is mine.
Is there any soil disturbance associated with this project and/or a possibility of erosion occurring as a result? Yes. Yes?
Yes.
All right.
I'll go down a limb and say that the applicant has demonstrated already, because the project underway, that the erosion control is in place and has been worked as needed in this tough site. That's really about it. I mean,
Okay. Is that a motion?
no, it was just a comment.
Okay.
Make it a motion.
I move that the applicant has satisfied our criteria for number 2 erosion control.
Somebody want? Okay. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
That's short and sweet.
5-0. Okay, number 3, relationship of the proposed building to the environment and the neighbouring buildings. So, I mean,
I'd almost say that's not applicable because the building is already there.
In this part of the review?
the only bit of building that's been added
So
to it
there's
is
no-
the entrance canopy.
There's no
right?
proposed building.
I think they've also made some nice gestures on the other side by having removed that elevator tower and the new fenestration that's going in.
Yep.
I think the building's been improved.
Yep.
I think we should include it. I don't think I know it's not a new building being put in, but I think it should be included.
Okay.
Want to do a motion then, Ethan?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd say that to the extent that the building is being modified, the relationship of the proposed building to the environment and neighboring buildings is been improved and made more harmonious.
Second.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. 5-0. Number 4, vehicular access, parking and circulation.
Go.
So obviously we do have some changes to the existing road layout.
And you got an A, B, and C on this one, right? So that talks about, I don't know, do you have that in front of you?
So read them out.
Distances.
Yeah.
I think you read them out and just identify that it meets those.
Okay, so any exit driveway shall be so designed as to provide the following minimum sight distance measured in each direction as measured from the point at which the driveway meets the public or private right-of-way. Minimum sight distance. We don't have a minimum sight distance.
No, you don't.
Okay, all right, never mind. Do we need to,
Maybe say that one's not applicable?
Not applicable.
not applicable for that
4A.
one? So 4A is not applicable.
Okay.
Okay, 4B, the street serving the site shall be adequate to carry the anticipated traffic, and the site plan shall locate points of access to avoid hazardous conflicts with existing turning movements and traffic flows. Does the board have any comments on that? Do we feel that's been adequately addressed?
Well, I think we've heard testimony from the applicant that they're pulling much of the congestion on Knowlton Street that exists now off the street with the bus loop and the parent pickup loop, so it should improve traffic on the street.
Okay.
My concern is that access road to the parking garage being eliminated. I mean, that's a traffic flow pattern that's eliminated. However, it is being redirected back into the middle school parking lot, so.
Well, again, they have the option to come right out here at this stop sign.
You can.
From this lot.
But if that parking lot's full, then how do you turn around up there? You know, you got to do a 3-point turn. You got cars behind you, and
It's a tough one. I hear where you're going, and if you can read that B, I'm just trying to follow along to make sure what you're saying matches up with that section. I'm not sure it does, but maybe you can try to get there, because it doesn't, it would have to be the second one of that B. and the site plan shall locate points of access to avoid hazardous conflicts with existing turning movements and traffic flows. That's the one you're,
But those are points of access, so we're talking about where the road meets. We're talking about their curb cuts is really what we're talking about. And to me, you've improved it in allowing more curb cuts, and one of them right here, do it again, that's a one-way right there, so if you are in this lot, you can't go behind the MET building. And so it really, to me, is, I like that one-way there in that direction, because it kind of sets the tone as to, you can go back out on a Knowlton, follow the one-way, get back in, but you can't cut that way on MET, because that, to me, a two-way traffic on the backside of that school would be kind of dangerous. But we're talking
Plus
about
not
the
enough room.
accesses.
There's just not enough room anyway.
That's right.
So, I mean, I'm fine with it. I just,
Yeah, noted.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and pedestrian ways shall be safely separated from vehicular traffic.
And you've done that behind MET
I
again.
mean, you've modified the plan to,
Yeah.
okay. So I would make a motion that the applicant meets the requirements for number 4, vehicular access, parking and circulation.
Second that.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Okay, surface water drainage, I guess. Go on, you can do that one.
This goes back to my only question before was, you also have 8-inch drainage pipes, or are those just under drains? Going to
That's
catch
actually
basins?
roof drainage.
Roof drainage.
Coming across the front.
That's what I saw.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, those are picking up the roof leaders that were indeterminate, let's
That's
put it that
right.
way.
They won't catch leaves, and we won't have to, jet them out.
No, those are coming from the top of the roof, so, and there's, in your roof system, there's a grate over those
Yeah,
that,
the flat roofs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was just that north side, when we have water concentrated flow over the pathway
changes up
at
there,
a door.
correct. Yep.
And it's on the north side and shaded. I mean, it's just, to me, a recipe up here. But if you're comfortable with it, I mean, it's your stamp. So to me, I think they've handled surface water drainage.
All those in favor?
Words I think in it,
Read
right?
that back?
Yeah, just read it for us a
I make a
second.
motion that the applicant has satisfied surface water drainage in accordance with our ordinance.
We have a second?
Yeah, second that
All
one too.
right, all those in favour? Aye. All right. Public utilities. Do we have a public utility expert on the board? Mark?
No.
Jumped in that one.
Do we have, I don't think we do have, we don't, is it really relevant? We don't have any
I think we have
additional
we've
facilities
Already gotten
using
those
sewer?
letters.
And there's no additional water being discharged, right?
I did get and I'm sorry I will incorporate these into the record, comments from wastewater superintendent, because we send these forms out. No comments on this from,
Okay, so we're moving right along?
and that everything's
Well, I do think
adequate.
6 applies.
From Dave Bolstridge.
I mean, I think that there's been some increased surface area, impermeable surface, things like that. So doesn't that storm drains, water lines? I mean, storm drains would be affected at least.
So will additional water be discharged into the storm drain system?
Yeah, I would think so.
Will additional water be discharged into the storm drain
talking into
system?
Knowlton Street now, it'll be less coming out into Knowlton Street.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we've designed everything so that anything that impacts it, we're reducing.
From the prior plans, you've taken a practice field and you paved it over, so there's going to be more stormwater there.
Right,
So
yeah, but-
I'm just trying to point that it applies. I'm not criticizing the plan.
No, and I'm just trying to explain, just so that you have some context, is this is the catch basin right here. This catch basin runs down the street and then back and connects into the system in the back that ultimately discharges into the river. So that was part of the change in the way that we dealt with drainage in here. We had to do some balancing so that when we brought the pavement back, we still maintained that reduction in coming into this public drain system.
You comfortable with that?
Oh, I was comfortable with it, but I think it applies.
Sure.
It applies.
Yeah.
That would have been the one before, because you're talking about, well, I guess it's public utility, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, that's where it comes down to, right?
That's why they're together.
Yeah, all right.
They were trying to just breeze past it, and I'm saying, no, we have to actually
Okay, so
find
you get to make the motion.
Vote away.
Public utilities, number 6, I move that criteria number 6, public utilities, has been satisfied per the ordinance.
Second that.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. That's good legal language. I like that. That was pretty nice.
Trying to shorten it for you guys. Come on. You don't like it when I talk.
Special features of, do love it when you talk. Special features of development. Are there any new exposed storage areas, machinery installations, service areas, etc. associated with this project?
Yeah, we talked about the heat exchanger shed.
Yeah, that one shed.
Heat exchanger building, or is it even an exchanger in there? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a heat exchanger in there.
It's way up by the
We
wastewater
call it the sewer
plant.
thermal shed. Yeah.
Sewer
Thermal
thermal
shed?
Or
Sewer thermal shed.
Yeah.
That keeps the kids out.
Avoid.
You don't hang out near that building.
Okay, so therefore that is a special feature of development. Yes, okay. So does it have a setback and screening that's sufficient to provide a buffer to sight and sound so that any adverse impact will be minimised?
I think it's neighboring property, the sewer treatment plant is, it matches with it.
Do we
just
feel
fine.
like it's been camouflaged sufficiently?
Kind of
I think it's
disappears
fine.
into the.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to make a motion? That's your department, sewage.
I move that special features of development has been satisfied by the applicant per our ordinance.
I'll second that.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Ooh, he's big on lighting too, isn't he?
Yeah, I know all about it.
This one's
Go right through the list. Emergency vehicle access, piers, wharfs. Oh, I got that.
We're running out of things. Right.
Will there be any additional exterior lighting?
Yes,
Yes.
you have 4
A little bit
posts.
new
Okay.
stuff.
And does the lighting design comply with the zoning ordinance?
I think it does, and I noticed that it's asymmetrical, the light shed.
Wait, instead of going
It's
just a
not
big
going into
circle
that
around the
neighboring
pole.
property and
They're
around the lot.
yeah.
What's
I
your
like
K? 2,700?
Oh. It matches the other one, which I think is actually 3,000.
And you said something during the presentation, it's a shoebox as opposed to a decorative?
It's more of
What's
a-
on the other part of the building?
Can we see the?
He's the lighting guy,
Yeah.
I couldn't tell.
It's still an attractive fixture, it's just not as.
Got our
It's
guy.
not, the other one was like circular,
You can say the architectural 4 feet light.
Yeah. Is that,
You want to make a motion?
I'm not good at doing this. I
You need to
move
practice.
that paragraph number 8, exterior lighting has been equaled or exceeded and should be approved.
I second that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Well, that was better than Ethan's language.
Whoa.
Do we, 9, what do we go up to? 9, 10?
9, the emergency vehicle.
Nine, last one, but not least. It is a little bit. Okay, so will the access for emergency vehicles to this area, has it been changed at all? I guess technically yes, because the new parking
Those around
area,
this
right?
building now, yeah.
So does it still, so are there still provisions made for convenient and safe emergency vehicle access to all buildings and structures, including 20-foot wide fire lanes at recommended locations?
I would advise you that the fire chief's reviewed this and is okay with the proposal.
Yes.
There we go. I'd take Chief's word.
Okay.
You want to make a motion on that?
I make a motion that emergency vehicle access has been satisfied per the fire chief, and our applicant has satisfied it.
I'll second that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, can we make a motion to, I make a motion to approve all the site plan approval criteria that the applicant has brought to us this evening?
I second that.
Like that one.
I gave you a final.
Final motion.
Final motion.
Final motion, sorry.
Yeah, you need
I
the
needed
You got
dates.
to
good
read
words.
that bold print there, Rosie, but we want you to do it.
Okay, I make a motion to approve the revisions to the site plan for SAD 28 and the new Camden Rockport Middle School prepared by Oak Point Associates dated January and February 2020.
And maybe I would include there the latest dated approved plans that have been submitted.
Specifically, the latest dated approved plans.
Latest dated plans, please.
Latest dated plans submitted.
That was the February 20.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
And I second that.
All those in favour? Aye.
And that's how you close a meeting.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Oh, we're still meeting. The meeting's not over.
Not over yet. Do we have to?
One other quick thing to chat about.
You guys
Thank
are free to
You
go.
guys are
Thank you
good.
so much.
It's,
Thank you for your patience.
It's developing a nice campus with the MHE school.
I'm looking forward to that playground.
The orders of food.
And we'll get this signed for you guys too, these
He's gone to order. That was quick.
Mylar actually.
Not to record it.
Good.
We
This
don't
will
need
be
to
on.
record it, we just.
Yeah. I don't like my tofu spicy.
Quick, come on.
Not right now.
We're not done yet.
Not right now, though. That's okay. I will. Thank you.
What are we doing now?
All right.
Jeremy's going to tell us what the next.
Following up on this agenda, really quick before we got to get out of here. My paper's got all discombobulated today.
You guys.
All right.
Yeah.
There's a March 19th meeting scheduled. And this is a challenging one for me right now. We've got a submittal that's been submitted. It is incomplete at the present time. This is a project that went to the Zoning Board of Appeals for Seasons of Smiles, located at 100 Elm Street. They were hoping to come in for the 19th for a site plan review.
Thanks.
And do a site walk at 3.
Safe travels.
But right now, the application is incomplete, and the ordinance says he's got, 14 days, 15 days, or whatever it is before the meeting for him to have a complete application. It's not complete.
I won't be here.
You won't be here.
Is there a time crunch that they're under? Or?
No.
I don't think
Okay.
so. I'd prefer to push this one off and get a complete application that I can review, make sure all the development criteria is
That's
done.
preferred.
Make sure that you guys have adequate zoning board information, because it did go to the ZBA like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
For special exception approval. And then since it's over 1,000 square feet, he's got they need site plan approval as well, so.
And they were missing stuff at the appeals. I guess I'm surprised that you've not received the materials if it was all.
Well, the
ready.
appeals information, the ZBA information is not the same that you guys need. So they're not the same.
There
I
aren't
think,
any submission requirements.
right.
really.
And I think they were trying to rely on the ZBA approval and plan just to take it to the planning board, but there's a whole host of this submittal requirements you need to do, and then you guys have to somehow take what they get and apply all these requirements that you just reviewed, these 9 or whatever, to that one, and I think it's hard to do without that additional information, so we're going to talk to the
We
applicant.
need it before the site walk.
We need it before the site walk. I mean, they haven't even come in to try to do a, pre-app meeting. I'm not sure we need a pre-app meeting. I think I'd rather just schedule a site walk, do a site walk, and then come back here and do a review of it. So that would probably be the first one in April.
So are we likely to have a meeting on March the 19th? Are you saying it's likely to be
As of right now, I don't think we got anything, Jeannie, do we?
No.
cancelled?
We got nothing.
Will it be April 2nd? Are you back, Mark?
I'm back in.
Okay.
I might not be here for that meeting. It's my son's birthday, but we'll see. I think I'm in Mexico at that time.
Can I be your son?
Can we go to his birthday party?
It's the gift that you share in. It's the best gift.
All right.
To Mexico?
So we will reach out to this applicant and just say, unfortunately, it's not a complete application. We can't get it on the agenda for March. We'll do it the next meeting in April, but we'll set up a site walk right before.
There you go.
Sound good?
Yeah.
So you should do that now.
So do we do the site walk right? So April meetings will be back to 5 p.m.
Schedule a site walk at,
Do a 4 p.m. site walk
Yep, 4 p.m. site walk on
the-
April 2nd,
on the 2nd. Does
100
that
Elm
work?
Street.
100 Elm.
Does that work, gentlemen?
God, that's so close to my house,
Yeah,
too.
before the
I'm
meeting.
missing out on the easy ones.
Where do you
And
live?
if we get done quickly, we've got Hill Street. Okay.
On the other side.
We're probably
All
like the
right,
same distance.
we're almost done. We're so almost done.
Really?
Yeah, just keep the focus, just for 30 more seconds. Anything else?
I think you're good. If I can get a signature on this one sheet, plan sheet, that'd be great.
From all of us or just me?
From all of you.
Okay.
Who's recycling all this stuff?
Can I stick in there? Look at this. Thank you. Am I supposed to officially close the meeting?
I think you should close this, and I'll take the other
Okay,
one.
so can I just declare the meeting closed?
Thanks, Mark.
Right, all those in favour? Aye, okay, meeting closed.